out here where legacy meets real life, parenting and marriage aren't just roles, they're battlegrounds for the next generation. In this episode, we sit down with Isaac and Angie Tolpin, parents of 9, builders of faith, and voices of courage in a culture that's losing its way. From raising kids with conviction to launching a church in the mountains of Idaho, this one's full of grit, grace, and truth you can carry home. So settle in, because this is more than a podcast. This is legacy work.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Man Up Podcast. I'm your host, Terry Gwaltney. Today I have my co-host with me. Super excited about that. Over the last 39 years, she's been my best friend, trusted advisor. Big reason why I have 3 amazing kids, my wife, Kim. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And our guests today are coming all the way from the great state of Idaho. Isaac and Angie Tolpin, welcome to the Man Up Podcast.
Oh, so good to be
Welcome,
here.
guys.
Can't wait to come see you guys in person.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're looking forward to it.
We definitely are. You have a super fan, in my daughter. She's an avid homeschooler, headed to, she just come back, I think, from, what was it, Dayton?
Dayton, Ohio, yes.
At a big homeschool conference, and she is actually how we ran across you guys. So I'm hoping we can really tap into even some of the homeschool network out there and bring some folks in and talk about parenting when you come in. But anyway.
Well, Angie's been homeschooling for how many years?
21 years.
21 years.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
So we're about to graduate our 4th oldest.
Wow.
We still will have 5 more to go.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
He always is schooling.
That's right. Life
Wow,
is education.
There's a lot of topic just right there. We may have to come back to that. So, So guys, if you didn't know, if you're listening today out at Man Up Nation, May the 17th, the Tulpins are going to be here for a conference called Leaving a Faith-Filled Legacy. And they're going to be at Legacy Farm from 9 to 3. And that's a conference that we're making available free of charge because we really want to invest in families, parents, marriages. And I was talking to somebody just the other day, and he said, it's a shame that even as dads, he said, we know more about fantasy football than we do about fatherhood. Mm-hmm. And I say a lot, we spend more time studying for our driver's license than we ever did for our marriage license. And this is just a great opportunity to come invest. Your marriage doesn't have to be in a crisis. If it is, still a great place to be. But the idea is all of our marriages, can be refreshed and need to be enhanced. And so I want the audience to know just a little bit more about you guys today. We'll kind of maybe start there if you guys are good with that, where you grew up, how'd you meet, how long you've been married, all that stuff, and let them know, on a personal level, who they're going to, be coming and hanging out with for 6 hours. And then we'll dive in maybe to a little bit of some of the content we'll talk about, some of that stuff. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah. I mean, I was a non-believer, became a believer at 23, large part because she planted a seed in my life for the Lord, and the Lord got a hold of me. And from that day forward, everything began for us. Why don't you share the rest, honey?
Yeah, so we've been married for almost 26 years. And like I mentioned, we have 9 kids. Our oldest is 24 and pregnant with our 4th grandchild. And then we have another son that's also married, and him and his wife just had their 3rd baby. They have 3 kids under 2.5. So we have a lot of little grandkids all at one time. It's pretty awesome. This year we get to go from 2 to 4. So that's exciting.
Wow.
But we have, our youngest is actually 3. So the age range of our kids is 24 to 3. So we're literally in pretty much every season of parenting all at the same time right now. And we have grandbabies too. So, and we're homeschooling all the different ages, and have a young adult living in the house still that's, 20 years old. And so it's just, there's a lot going on in our life. And it's an adventure, but we have found that it's been such a blessing having Courageous Parenting, the podcast, and the different ministry stuff that we've been doing, because everything is really, we're literally in the trenches, so to speak. We're still in that season of life. And I'm sure that you guys know this just as well as anybody, that once you get like 5 to 10 years removed from that season of life, there's so many things that you forget, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I didn't even really fully realize that until we had the 6-year gap between our 6th child and our seventh. And then having that baby again, it was like starting over. And I was so surprised at how much I had forgotten. And so I just really loved and been passionate about pouring into moms for a really long time, because I think primarily I didn't know what I was doing when I got married.
Mm.
I had to learn everything too.
Yeah.
How to be a husband, how to be a godly father,
Mhm.
all of these things. And our goal was really to create a new legacy. That's why when you reached out and it's Legacy Farms, we're like, these are
Well,
our
this
people
is
right
our
here.
people. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So
That's so cool.
a lot of it, like our faith journey has been, we've been raising our kids as Christians, and in that there have been a lot of, as you guys know, when you're raising your kids, sometimes you come upon things that you either one of you experiences conviction, and then you have to come together and make a decision and figure out how you're going to be in a marriage alignment. And a lot of those topics, whether it was, are we going to celebrate Halloween? Are we going to homeschool? All the different, like, what sports do we do with our kids? What friends, what people are we going to be hanging out with? All of those things impact your family and your legacy, right? And so we just realized, I think it was probably 10 years ago, God started putting a lot of families in our life that were about 10 to 15 years younger than us. And
Mm.
they were asking a lot of questions, and we were just sharing our life and what God had taught us over the years. And then based on their encouragement to step out in faith and start the podcast, that's kind of how it got started.
And that's so good. I was listening to a podcast just this weekend. The gentleman made a comment that just really resonated with me. And he said, we are the most qualified to teach those that are just like us.
Hmm.
And you think about it, the people that were just like us. And, it doesn't mean that you have to have a PhD to pass on wisdom. You don't have to have necessarily even ministry experience or any of that kind of stuff, or be, formally trained. And I think, to speak to what you're saying, you knew you didn't know. You knew what you didn't know, and you probably knew you was grasping for resources to figure out, I don't want to mess this thing up. Legacy really is involved here, and
Yep.
there's no clear roadmap. And I thought I had it figured out on kid number one, and then this second alien come along with this different personality. Like, whose kid is that? And I can't imagine that 9 times over. Every time you think you've got to figure out, it's a different roadmap. But wow, I believe you're probably qualified if you're keeping 9 of them alive to speak into the lives, speak into the lives of other parents today.
We're gonna come not only help you keep them alive, but how to thrive and launch confident Christian kids into these unprecedented times, which I think takes more intentionality today than ever before.
Yeah.
I would say too, one of the things that we've been experiencing most recently, just so people know a little bit more about us, we recently, Isaac planted a church here in our hometown in the mountains of Idaho, and that was in October. So we're just about to have our 6-month anniversary on Resurrection Sunday, and
Oh, wow.
God's been doing some amazing things. But I think that for us on a personal level, the biggest impact has been building God's kingdom with our kids versus building our own. Like, we've always had a homestead that we would work together as a team on, and we would do different projects to cultivate that team atmosphere with our kids, because that was really important to us as far as family culture. And there have been a lot of things that we've done ministry wise, serving, that we've had them come along and help us with.
Sure.
This has just been a very different kind of investment. It's kind of like being on a mission trip in your own hometown. And one of the things that we've talked about recently is how we're all on a mission trip, and we should all have that perspective, but it may look slightly different for each person based upon their giftings and callings, right? And so having that vision of like, okay, God created me for the purpose, for many purposes, but one of them is the Great Commission. What does that look like first and foremost with my kids? And then how is it supposed to look as an overflow from my home into the community? And so that's just been a really exciting adventure that we've been on with them recently in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we were very involved in church life when our kids were young. We got married young. We tell people, we got married as kids, had kids as kids, and we kind of all grew up together. And we're really not old enough to have 6 grandkids or 3 grown kids, but hey, here we are. So we're kind of in our own season as empty nesters, and we feel a lot of the same passion of, I think wisdom is what you learn from other people. Experience is what you learn from your own mistakes. And we've got plenty of our own mistakes, and just a real heart to kind of to try to reach out and like, you need to look what's coming down the road. You need to understand why this is important now. You, that's a bad decision, and here's why. Let me show you this scar.
So
and I
true.
think if more of us would just be willing to be a little bit more vulnerable. I love that scripture in Corinthians. I think it's First Corinthians 1:4. Where it talks about, we were comforted and given this hope in our time of trouble, and for the purpose of comforting others that are in a time of trouble. And I know for me, and I think for many believers, especially guys, I know there's a lot of guys listening to the show today. We kind of like to cover up our scars because we don't want to talk about that period of pain in our life, and it's because of pride. And I think if we can just allow a little bit of humility, because again, we're the most qualified to help the person that we used to be, and just share some of that pain so others don't have to, and just kind of lay down our pride. I mean, boy, we could be so life-giving, kind of what you were talking about a while ago, helping people not just live, stay alive, but really helping them how to thrive. So
Oh, you're so right. I mean, it's kind of reorientating our definition of what strength as man is. And we've kind of been sold this, bag of lies almost, that it's to look a certain way, be always strong, never vulnerable, to always putting on a front that looks invincible, and these kinds of things, capable in every area, don't need anybody, don't need help, all of these things. And it's just, it's going to internally, what happens to man is it gets frustrating, it gets debilitating, and it's limited, and it also repels deep friendships with other men. Instead, to your point, exactly right, Terry, is vulnerability is real strength. And if we can reorientate how we look at what strength is as a man, wow, now we're going to have comrades to run the race with. We're going to have deeper relationships that are more than about football. We're going to go into a mode where there's safety because we're not missing our blind spots as we're leading our families in these different times where there's more attacks on the family.
Yeah. I was amazed. We started a 3-day off-grid camp for men 2 years ago. And the first year we had about 80 guys, and we do it at Legacy Farm. And really, it never was on our radar when we bought the property. Legacy Farm, the mission statement is create memories, empower families, inspire legacy. And so there's three very distinct buckets. There's a lot of stuff we can do. There's 110 acres here. There's some buildings. We want to build more to have lodging. Wow. If you could just come up with some resources, there's a lot you can do here. But like, what are we supposed to do here? And so we decided it really needed to fit in those 3 buckets. If it's not creating a memory, we probably shouldn't be doing it. If it's not empowering a family somehow in their marriage or parenting, and then, the legacy aspect of that, obviously that could deal with men or women, but we're also thinking of this real leadership component in business people and how we could, pay it forward. But we didn't have our lodging all built out yet. And it was like, well, what can we do with what we have on the way to where we're going? And so it's almost like we just stumbled onto this camp idea. And there was 80 guys there the first year, and we were blown away. Never something that I was like, that's what I want to do. That's something I'm excited about. I just felt like it's something we were supposed to do. And so we did it. And we were shocked at just what God did on a hillside with a bunch of guys. So we did it again the next year. There was 180.
Wow.
And so that was last year. And it was like, whoa. I mean, it was the stories now that we were starting to hear were phenomenal. So we do that again this October, and we're already on track now to have 410 guys there. I think we're going to be somewhere between 500 and 600 before it's all said and done.
Wow.
And so I spoke at just a small gathering of guys that came to that camp because they represent all these different churches from multiple states. I mean, no particular denomination affiliation, which is what makes that so unique, I think. It's just, it created a space for God to do whatever he wanted to do with no label on it. And so these guys came out of our camp and went back, and they just started, they already had a real vibrant men's group. They brought like 30 guys to ours. And so they were going to do this camp out, and they said, hey, would you come and speak? And so I spoke just for, a couple minutes, but there was a gentleman that called me after I was done. This was just like a couple of days ago. And he said, these guys came to your camp the first year and asked me to go. And I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor and sleeping on the ground in a tent. It just really wasn't my thing. So I didn't go. But he said, they all came back talking about how great it was and how they'd been impacted. And he said, so I went last year. And he's probably going to listen to this, and I don't think he would care at all because I thought it was just powerful. But he said, I've struggled being able to worship God in public. And, we have a big tent set up, almost like a circus tent. There's a live band. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not just a camping trip throwing axes. And so there's 4 of those, Friday night, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday morning. And he said, God was just dealing with me about it on Friday night, and I kept avoiding it. Saturday morning, same thing. And then on Saturday, the guys get sent out for an hour of solitude where nobody talks to anybody, and they just go somewhere on the property and sit out for an hour, and they just journal what God's telling them. When it come time for Saturday night, he said the music started coming up, and the guys in his camp said, hey, let's go. And he said, I was going to stay back and watch all the fires out here in this open field. He said, I was just making excuses. I did not want to go. He said, but God kept tugging at me. And he said, so I ended up going up there. He said, when I walked into the tent, he said, God told me, he said, just shut your eyes and raise your hands. And he said, it took all I could do, but he said, I did that. He said, and then God said, I want you to open your eyes. And God, listen, it's hard enough for me to do this. He said, I want you to open your eyes. And he said, when I opened my eyes, he said, I literally seen the praises of 170 to 80 men just ascending into heaven. And I mean, it was like almost chill bumps, came over me. I said, how old are you? He said, well, I'm 68. And he'd been in church most of his life. But there's something about when you get a group of men together and they see other men being vulnerable, to my point of what we were just talking about, that it just creates this atmosphere like it's okay. It's okay to let God kind of get in this space in my life. And I think it just sums up what we're talking about, and obviously what I hope, some of the same outcomes that we see, just with entire families, at the event that we have coming up. So,
yeah. Jeff, one thing you said is journaling is so powerful, and unfortunately, in our society, it seems that women take up journaling way more than men do. And I think that's a travesty because there's something really special about being completely alone, no distractions, and journaling down your thoughts, what you think God's telling you, your plans, your ideas, your areas of opportunity, and all of these things is so rich. And one of the things we're going to get to do when we come to see you guys and everybody there is at lunchtime, there's going to be opportunity for married couples to work together on some of that hard work, which we're really excited about, because how often do men actually do that? And if we work the muscle, and then if you do that with your bride at the same time, in terms of marriage and parenting opportunities, to actually leave with concrete things that will forever impact your legacy is the mission. And that's what we hope to do together.
It's interesting. One of the things that we hear a lot from women in our ministry is they're always asking, how do I encourage my husband to be a spiritual leader? How do I encourage my husband to lead with vision or lead with mission without being the one that's actually encouraging him? Like it's this
or leading with vision or leading with mission.
It's a tricky thing, right? And that's part of why we decided to do ministry together, because we've always been doing what we call visioneering together, but Isaac has always led that. And so together, being able to talk to couples for him to inspire and encourage other men and what it looks like to lead your wife, to challenge them in thinking, to bring up discussions that need to be talked about so that there's further marriage alignment, right? So that they can literally leave with more of a concrete vision for their family, whether that's family culture or things that they need to work on, dreams 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, and recognizing what they do today builds tomorrow. And for them to sit and get in alignment, couples can leave excited to continue in their marriage together. Like they have someplace they're going together as a team. And that's really what we hear women are constantly crying out for, but they need a guy who's been doing this to say, hey guys, it's not as hard as everybody thinks it is. Let's do this together. Let me show you how. And that's what's exciting, is to think of stronger marriages, people more in alignment, where they're making decisions in their parenting, but they're backing each other up, right? They've got each other's back. They're on each other's team. There's less of an opportunity for the enemy to get a foothold.
Yeah, because if your marriage isn't aligned, your parenting will struggle behind. And so it's so important that, and oftentimes, actually, it's even places that we're not aware of until somebody presents an area, a question, a discussion question. And we've seen this over and over again.
Yeah.
It's the places where couples didn't realize they weren't in alignment that was eroding their authority, their respect, their influence with their children, and they were doing it to each other and didn't even know it. And so to bring that to light and bring powerful discussion about that with an action plan is huge.
It's funny, we always say, hey, we'll throw ourselves under the bus. No big deal. And we'll bring up the hard things, that sometimes couples don't want to talk about. But if another couple brings it and says, hey, this is something you need to talk about, then it's like, okay, well, we should probably go to that question they had on the list, or we should probably talk about that. And and it makes it easier for the couples who have had a really hard time to talk about some of those more really deeply hurtful or more intimate topics, or things that have just been harder to bring up.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes this so good and so helpful is, everybody didn't have a good model. I mean, if you think about the average person, more than 50% of the people are going to come from a broken home.
Yep.
And we don't realize that we're modeling and mentoring as we're parenting how I should act as a father, as a husband, as a mother, as a spouse, as a wife. And they pay so much more attention to what we do than what we say. And I think, just being able to step in and offer some practical things, I think it'd be powerful. I think as guys, we need a plan. We know that in business. I need a business plan. I need a goal. I need to have a vision statement. Where are we going to end up? How are we going to do it? What's our mission? What's the values that are going to shape the decisions that we have? We have it for vacation. Where are we going to go? Until you decide where you want to end up, you can't lay out the roadmap. You can't determine where you're going to stay, what activities you're going to do. Yet we're kind of roaming through marriage and parenting like willy-nilly, like, I really don't know where we're going to end up. I'm just hoping to survive, and drifting is not much of a strategy. And then we're surprised when we end up somewhere that we never intended to be, but we never had a plan to get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's you guys are going to help be able to maybe inspire some hope and some vision on, like, listen, what do you want that to look like? Because you're shaping that today.
Absolutely. It takes way more intentionality than previous generations of parents. It takes more intentionality in your marriage as well. We don't live in fear. We don't ever talk about being fearful at all, because the Bible speaks against that. We're only to trust in our all-powerful God. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility that God gives us to equip the next generation, his little people. And to do that, we have to have a strong marriage. And to do that, you have to have an intentional roadmap. And I think that while each marriage has their own unique variances in their intentional roadmap, it's all putting God at the center of their marriage and at the center of their family, and hoping for the things that are everlasting versus the things that are finite, just worldly. And so if we can encourage families to get on that path and help them move in that direction and lead in that direction, that's what's essential today. So yeah, we're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about parenting. We're going to have some Q&A time. We're going to have time where married couples can work together and discuss what's been taught so far, and then come back together and learn some more. So it's going to be good.
That's awesome. Anything you want to ask these guys? Anything you think the audience maybe would want to know?
Yeah. So what's one thing in your marriage that you could have been better prepared for?
Oh, that's good. I think probably the two things. One thing was when we had how many under 7 years old at one time?
We had 5 kids 7 and under.
That was a hard time.
Wow.
And there's
You
very
think?
there's very little helpfulness, because once that
So you're
7-year-old
just
was
a
pretty
little.
helpful, but that was a busy time. So just, I
Mhm.
don't think anybody's ready for that. But you know what? God.
I'm getting tired just hearing the story.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
just put it that
And
way.
put entrepreneur on top of that. But
Wow.
I think that the good news is we don't get them all at once. And so God is expanding our capacity and teaching us as we go. Now I know some of you listening got, two at once or three at once, and what a blessing, right? That's your own
It's a different
your
boot
own
camp.
awesome thing. But
Mhm.
but I think it's a wonderful thing that we get a growing capacity. I remember when I had one or two, I'm like, I had a friend that had 6 kids. He wrote a book about it. And I'm like, how in the world does he have 6 children? That guy is kind of crazy and kind of cool. And I don't know which one yet. And I just remember thinking those thoughts as I had my plan of having 2. And I,
It's like you should have got a television. That plan went out the window.
yeah, but we don't come. Everybody should know this. We don't come from big families, and God just had a unique plan for us. And I want everybody listening. God has a unique plan for every family. We don't believe everybody should have the exact plan we do. God has a unique plan for each family.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
it just so happened that on our hearts, we were just like, let's just have one more.
We
And
took
we
it
went
one at a time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and God had to work on my heart in some ways that were really powerful, and Angie's heart in some ways. I even had a vasectomy scheduled, and I just drove by. I didn't go in. And
At what number was that?
That was after number 2, right?
I think it was 4.
Wow.
Oh, we
It was
Wow.
4.
had it. Well, we had talked about it after 2, but after 4, you had it scheduled.
It was
Yeah.
4. It was like,
have a
wow,
unique
we've
story.
broken the
You
mold.
just
Wow.
kept driving, obviously. You just kept driving by.
Right by it. It wasn't like on a freeway. You had to get off the freeway, go. I drove right by it on a side street and real slow. I'm like,
That's awesome, though. It's cool. God had a different plan. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So 9 kids later, some of them adults, some of them still young. At this point, if you had to sum it up, like what's been the most rewarding part of parenthood for you guys? I mean, I think every parent listening, they can identify with the struggles,
Right.
and then there comes a time when you're on the other side of that. Like I wouldn't trade that for anything, but there's probably a lot of people living in the middle of that. It's like, I don't even know if I'm going to get out of this.
There's a whole number of things, but something that comes to mind is something Angie just recently told me about our 21-year-old son who just had his 3rd child, amazing marriage, and he said something to her about a principle I had taught him that when she reverberated it back to me, reminded me of the principle myself, and that I needed to hear. And so it's just really amazing when you're intentional with your children and they have a kingdom mindset and they have a mindset of raising up the next generation and a legacy mindset. What happens is they start to sharpen you when they're older and remind you of things you've forgotten. And that is amazing. Another thing that's amazing, I know I'm hogging and I'll let you go in a sec, but another thing is amazing is when we all get together and we love on each other. And when it's somebody's birthday, for example, and we go around the table and each person says something they appreciate about that person on their birthday. But because there's so many, it takes a long time.
It's like a shower.
And it's like you see them just getting filled up by all their siblings. And it's like, wow, look at this team that loves each other and spurs each other on. That's been really rewarding now that we're seeing some signs of the launched kids and older children and speaking into the younger.
I think that for me, when I first met Isaac, I thought that I was going to be celibate and be a missionary. I didn't think I was going to have kids or get married. That was my will for myself.
Wow.
And God obviously had a different plan, which was much better. But I had to be rebuked by a mentor in my life who said, Angie, I don't think that you get the ministry of marriage. I don't think you understand the exponential impact that a family can have ministry-wise. Because if you did, you wouldn't be running away from it. You'd be running towards it.
Ooh.
And I had to chew on that for a long time and wrestle with my will versus God's will, all the wills, everybody's will for my life. And now, 26 years later, looking at where my kids are at and seeing where their faith is at in their own personal faith journey, and how God is already revealing things to them that he has for them to do within the body of Christ, right? And seeing them say yes to him, seeing their heart's desire to be obedient, that actually is like the biggest reward. Is like, if I could just take a snapshot of the years when I was growing up, one of the things, my parents were really passionate about worship. And so they met doing worship team. And my whole childhood, they were on the worship team together. And so, of course, I was on the worship team when I was a teenager, and I loved to do that. But then I got married and we started having babies, and that was a hard thing to do, to be on a worship team while you're pregnant, like many years and all the things. And so that was a kind of a thing that I let go of and realized that's not something that God has me. My ministry is with my kids right now. And I recognized the season of life that I was in, not realizing the season of life would span so many years. And now it's fast forward, and I see two of my kids leading worship, both playing guitar. And I see that legacy that even my parents, I think they for sure were legacy minded when it came to worship. And they were legacy minded when it came to, I want my kids to love Jesus, or I want them to know the Bible.
Awesome things.
And there were some awesome things, but there were some other things though that like I was ill-equipped for. Like, I didn't have a stay-at-home mom. I wasn't homeschooled. Pretty much everything that we've chosen that were, just like the more secondary lifestyle decisions, were like first generation in all of those. So I've had to fumble my way through and learn alongside my kids. And I think that the other reward would be that they see that life is learning, because they watched mom and dad learn alongside them. And it wasn't this like, oh, this is how we do it, and this like prideful, like, do it the way I've always done it, or the way that I've always been taught to do it. It was, let's learn it together. I don't know, let's figure that out. And parenting is just really humbling. It's like, probably, I know that people say marriage is hard, and it is, but in certain seasons of life more than others. But I think it's actually parenting that's really humbling in a lot of ways, especially when your kids start getting older, and you're like, you oftentimes, when kids are little, you can see a mirror image of them and you, right? And that's, you're like, oh, they're lacking emotional self-control. Are they mimicking me? You have to ask yourself those hard questions. But when they're older and they have their kids, then there's also that blessing of like looking at them being a dad for the first time. Or our oldest daughter is pregnant with her first, and I just saw her yesterday, and I was like, she's so cute. Yeah. And there's something different about how they love their kids that reminds you of like, okay, we didn't do it all wrong. Like, it's encouraging, right? Because there is so much that's humbling. It's encouraging to see the good things that they're doing and the things that they're choosing to replicate. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think that when you have older kids, it spurs you on to keep staying on the same road and working hard with the ones that you currently have. Or at least for me, that's it, right? Like, people go, wow, you've been homeschooling 21 years. Did you always think you would homeschool all the way through? Did you, I'm like, no, I took it 1 year at a time. But every time I got past first grade, fourth grade, high school, I would look at all my other kids and go, oh, we can go through first grade. I already did that. Oh, we can go through fourth grade. I already did that. Oh, we can do high school. We've done that. Because you see the fruit in your kids from what you've done. And that's kind of that proof in the pudding that, like, when you get discouraged, you look at them and you go, it's worth it because of their character. It's worth it because of the fruit in your family relationships. It's worth it because of X, Y, and Z,
In a lot of ways, it sounds a lot like faith too. You can have faith for bigger things when you've had to believe for harder things. And then you're able to turn around and it's like, yeah, this mountain is not that big because I remember, the last one that we overcame. And that's hard when you're in the middle of it, or when you're climbing that first hill, or when you're homeschooling probably the first,
first
child.
One was the hardest. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
why God's design is that the older men and women teach the younger men and women. Yeah. Right? We see that in Titus 2. And there's not, honestly, I think that there's not enough older men teaching the younger men. I think that it's really a common phenomenon to have women's Titus 2 ministries in churches and not so many Titus 2 men's ministries in churches. And so I think that that's something that needs to be more cultivated and inspired, and maybe a fire lit underneath some of the guys, um, and I think that is the biggest impact, actually, is when people are just willing to say, it's not about what we've done. It's about what God's word says. It's not about, our opinion. It's about what God's word says. And we all have the same guidebook. Let's look at it together, and let's talk about some real issues that you face as parents and as a married couple.
So I'm curious, that void that we as men have left by not stepping in more in that mentoring role, what do you think, what's been the result of that? There's obviously always a consequence to inaction. What are you seeing now in the church world? What do you think is the consequence of that absence?
I don't think a lot of men even know when they became a man. I think there's a bad definition of that because other men haven't declared their masculinity, their manhood, their graduation into that, and what that means from a biblical perspective. So I think that's one thing. I think a lot of guys are secretly insecure because of that, because I think it takes other godly men to speak into you to grow in that confidence and to lean on the Lord. It's very, very helpful, at least. And I think there's a lack of accountability. So worldliness is running rampant in secret lives of men, which is they're nominalizing what's okay. I mean, their pornography, for example, or what their eyes are seeing is destructive and destroying so many men. And what it does is it breaks them down, even though they look tough on the outside. It breaks them down from doing any kind of spiritual leadership because the guilt is like shackles holding them to a place where they need to be released of that so they can actually be used for God with their families in the community around them. And I think it takes other men running the race in a deeper way to achieve that with such a high percentage of men being in shackles.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. That's a lot.
So, yeah, there's another podcast right there. So talk to the audience. I'm always shocked. It seems like in Christian circles that what we need the most, we're willing to pay for the least, whether that's financial investment or a time investment. And this conference coming up is an investment into parenthood, and it's an investment into your marriage, and ultimately what we've been talking about is like, what legacy are you going to leave? You're shaping that right now, and everything that's happened up to this point in your life has helped shape who each and every one of us are, but they don't get to determine who we become. So we have a choice, and these next choices can change the trajectory of our family forever. So talk to the audience about how important you think it is to invest in your marriage, not on a one-time basis, but on an ongoing basis.
It's essential because we constantly need recalibration. If you don't recalibrate, the natural way of things is towards mediocrity, actually. And so if we're not taking time and investing time, energy, thoughtfulness, relationship with our spouse away from our children at times and doing that, then what we're going to find is burnout, frustration, erosion of marriage closeness, and a lack of ability to have the energy to even do more than the basics in raising our children. And so it really does take a recalibration, because if we don't, we'll start realizing we've said yes to too many things, and we won't realize what we need to start saying no to, for example, so that we have more time. But what are your thoughts?
I think that time is our greatest commodity, even much more than money. It's the thing that people care about most, actually. And that's, where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. And I think that if people are going to invest in their marriage, whether that's going to a marriage and parenting conference or being consistent on taking their wife out on a date and communicating or spending that time being able to connect with one another and keep the marriage before the children, because in this big scheme of things, it's priorities is God, marriage, kids, not God, kids, marriage, not kids, marriage, God. And a lot of people have that mixed up. And I
Yeah.
think that our time actually reveals a lot of what we believe as far as where our heart really is at, right? And
Yeah.
I know that for a lot of women, what we hear in our ministry is this deep desire to have stronger marriages. They really want that, and a lot of their parenting struggles come because of the marriage struggles, actually. And so the first step is strong individuals who are strong in the Lord. The second step is strong marriages. And then you can start to have hope for strong families, right? And then when you have
Yeah.
strong families, you can have stronger churches. When you have stronger churches, you can have stronger communities. And so that's why it's important that we all take responsibility in investing in our relationship with God first and foremost. But then we also all have to take responsibility for our marriages and prioritize those. And you were talking about busyness and time, like it's a huge deal. I think that a lot of people are so busy building their kingdom or building their business is what I mean by building their kingdom, or whatever their hobbies are, that they don't prioritize sitting and taking time to really evaluate where are we going as a married couple 5, 10, 20 years down the road. What are we dreaming of?
It's so true. I mean, your vision has to be stronger than your career for your family. So, is your vision for your career larger and more important than the vision for your family? Well, that would be wrong. If your vision for your family is the strongest and where you're going, that would be right, and it'll help your business. Like, for example, why do so many pastors have issues with pastor kids syndrome? Is because the vision for their church becomes bigger than their vision for their family.
That's so good.
And
Yep.
a commitment that I've made as being a pastor is that vision for my family is much bigger. And frankly, honestly, I hope everybody from church hears this, more important than the vision for the church. While that is very important, and I take it seriously, if if my family crumbles, I'm not qualified to do anything anyways.
Yeah, that vertical relationship is not right. Then all the horizontal and suffer. And I think you're right. I think nobility, pride, false humility, ego, all that gets rolled up in there, and suddenly that is the most important. I had somebody tell me years ago, is the only congregation that's going to be with you your entire life is going to be your family, and so you better make sure that you're sacrificing for the right group of people.
Yes.
And yeah, there's a lot to be said here. I think just when we're talking about work-life balance, anymore, we talk, with our team, it's really work-life integration, because, they overlap.
Yeah.
You're in a toxic work culture, you're going home in a bad mood. You have a bad marriage at home, you're not showing up fully present, engaged at work.
Exactly.
And so one feeds off the other. And I don't know, Kim, just speak in here and kind of talk to us about a couple of tips for some of the guys maybe that are struggling out there on what can they do to have more of a healthy work-life balance. Any tips at all?
Yeah, I think that one, you might be operating in your own strength too much if you feel like you have to work too much. And so one of the things that is powerful, and I've gone in and out of this, I'm not perfect at this, right? But when I'm reminded that I need to put God first, I need to make sure I'm in the Word. I make sure that I'm trying to glorify God, not myself, through things that I'm doing. I want to make sure that I'm listening, paying attention to what the Spirit's prompting me in, and to give Him the glory, to be surrendered in my approach. It's much easier than to know when God has the reins to say, I'm going to be home for dinner. When the old you, when didn't give God the reins in your work, would be like, no, I just got to muscle more. I just got to get more done. I got to keep doing it because it's all about my strength versus God's strength. And so I think that is a huge deal. And I think we just got to us guys, we've got to, in a practical way, trust God more, believe in His power versus our power. And if we're tapped into the Lord in that way, He is going to fan your flames, not always in the exact ways that you hope for. And the reason for that is because he knows what's even better for you. And it doesn't mean it looks better in the short term, but he'll do things and help you in ways that in the long term are far better. I've experienced that so many times.
Mhm.
Maybe you could also share with the guys about your vision of incorporating marriage into whatever you are doing with work, because I think that that's a huge thing that, the Bible says that two are better than one. And so, whatever Isaac was always doing, he was really good at leading and pulling me into feeling like I was a part of it. And that strengthens marriage and it gives vision. So, like when he would be out late, I knew that he was being on purpose and that he was using, even in the marketplace, we viewed ourselves as missionary marketplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, oh, I know he's being purposeful and having a conversation with a guy that's probably going to lead to the gospel. And like, I was more supportive of that because he communicated with me. So
I think it's important to recognize that when you make sacrifices for work, which sometimes are important, especially in entrepreneurship, there's seasons of hustle, seasons of working harder. I've had those. But let's not forget that you're not the only one sacrificing. Your wife is sacrificing too. Less help from you with the kids, longer days for her. And if you want your spouse, if you want your wife to be supportive, then you need to come and go on a date night and go, hey, there's this thing that I think that we could take the business to a next level, or there's this thing we have to get through to make sure the business survives, or whatever it is. But it's going to take some sacrifice. And here's some of the ways we're going to have to sacrifice. I wanted to hear your thoughts about this. I wanted us to be able to pray together about this and then come back together and talk about it more. And I think when you get buy-in together, when you include your spouse in those decisions, then when it really gets tough, and it always gets tougher at some point, when it really gets tough down the road, she's so bought in, you're feeling like maybe I shouldn't persevere. And then she comes in and goes, you got to go, you got to finish, you got to make this happen. No, we're going to do this. Versus what most guys experience is, why aren't you home? What are you doing? Where are you? And your wife will make you feel guilty, but that's really your fault probably, because you have not got buy-in. You are not doing things together, and you're not a team in it, even if she's not coming to work with you. And I think that's important. There's lots of ways you can include your wife, even if they never go to work with you. And I just think it's so important. And when there's successes too, to celebrate with your bride and recognize her and that how powerful her support is, and that she deserves every bit of congratulations as much as you do. And I think that it just goes a long ways.
Yeah. Yeah. The cheerleader at home, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we don't care about anybody's opinion more than our spouses. And so, those words can either be life-giving or they can be the death of a dream and a heartbeat. So talk to us quickly as we kind of land this plane. How can an event like the Faith-Filled Legacy Conference be beneficial for the entire family? If you had to sum that up, I'm going to give up 6 hours on a Saturday to come hang out with people that I don't know, to a place that I've never been, that only God could find. It's in the middle of nowhere. How is this going to be beneficial for my entire family? I'll never get the 6 hours back.
Well, the first thing I want to say is, just because it's free, don't read into that.
Absolutely.
Terry and Kim are investing a serious amount of money actually to do this. Normally you'd be paying a lot of money for this, for us to come out and to do this. And so just because it doesn't cost anything, don't read into that in the wrong way. This is a high value event, and the outcomes, we believe, if you're studious, and if you're coming ready to take notes, and if you're coming ready to talk to each other at lunchtime and journal and participate, we absolutely believe this is a legacy transforming event, even if things are solid for you, even if things are good for you, even if things are not good for you. Whatever the situation, the principles we're going to talk about on parenting and marriage, and a lot of times you just get one or the other, They have to be together, we believe, in these uncertain times. They are intertwined. And so we're going to be teaching about things and then helping you get in alignment. And it's going to be enriching to your marriage, enriching to your parenting. And the goal is that you are more equipped to disciple your children. You're more equipped to discipline them biblically in a way that builds stronger relationship with them, but also points them to God in the process. You're going to understand how to have respect from your children so it's easier to teach them things and they listen, to marriage alignment, to enriching your marriage and having a thriving marriage.
I just think of a lot of the couples that are out there that maybe are they haven't been married for 10 years yet, right? And statistically, the hardest years of marriage are between years 9 and 11 as far as divorce rates. And I would say that for the younger couples that are coming, think of this as like a second chance at premarital counseling, but it's like parenting counseling too, in a sense, right? Where you're like talking about issues that you're in the hustle and bustle of the years with the little ones, and maybe it's hard with a crying baby to have the conversations even about intimacy. Do you know what I mean? Like to really sit down and be like, okay, if we were to rate our intimacy level and you each rate it separately, are you going to have the same number? Are you going to have the same perspective on your intimacy? Because that actually has a lot to do with your communication and where your marriage is at, right? And being able to talk about like hard topics like that at the same time as also hearing from people who have gone before you potentially in a lot of things, right? And being able to share like the big mistakes like we were talking about, right? Like for me as a woman, the best mentors I ever had were the ones that shared with me their big mess ups. Like you can hear all day long all the good things to do. But if someone says the biggest mistake I had was always teaching my kids all the time and I didn't take time to sit on their bed just to be in their presence. Or like that, like that's a relational thing. Like if you're so busy that your kids feel like they're luggage getting moved around from one thing to the next, that there's no time to just be with mom and dad and to enjoy one another's presence, that's kind of a big deal. That actually affects your relationship with them when they're older. You know what I mean? And like that is a reflection of this very simple term that is used all the time: delight in your children. What does that actually mean, to delight in your kids?
I think another thing too, there's people listening from all different parenting seasons, and this will hit you whether you have a 2-year-old or an 18-year-old.
Right.
This is going to be relevant, and it's never too late to shift your parenting and make a difference, no matter how challenging things might feel in your home right now with maybe some of your middle schoolers or older kids. It's never too late, and there's things you can shift. See, so and I think that parents are leaders. One of the principles that so many leaders are challenged with is they forget how influential they are, because it doesn't feel like what I'm doing makes a difference because of where my relationship is at with one of my kids or something like that. But we're here to say you have massive amount of influence. But sometimes it does take a little tweak here, a little tweak there, and it makes all the difference. And so you'll be getting those tweaks to make.
That's good. There's 6 generations, I think, alive on the earth today. If you go from the traditionalists all the way down to, it's like 80 to 100 years old, and you go down to the alpha generation, that's 12 and under. My family, there's 4 generations that are alive. My dad, more than likely over the course of the next decade will pass on. And what's happening is I think we can all relate to the fact of how quick those seats are changing from generation to generation. It wasn't that long ago I was a son, and then I woke up and 19 I was a dad. And then a year later, or 12 years later, I guess it was. How long were they married? 11 years.
11, yeah.
Yeah. I was a grandfather. But, then I lost my grandfather. My dad moved up and he became the patriarch in the family.
Yep.
And before long, I'll move up and be the patriarch in the family. And so I think what ties all of this up, wherever anybody that's listening is at, is that legacy is going to be passed on. It's just a matter of what are we passing on, and are we growing, and are we being intentional in these seasons to make sure what really matters. We get so caught up in what we're doing when God is so much more concerned in who we're becoming. And if we would have that same kind of intensity with our kids and our families, and it is just like you said, it doesn't matter what season you're in. It is not too late. We had a gentleman said, I hate, just dramatic change in his life. And a daughter, I think that's like 10 years old. And she knows all of my bad and all before, and I just don't want her to remember that. And I said, dude, what she's going to remember is the transformation that she's seen right before her eyes on how her dad stepped into being a man. I said, that's going to be the impact that's going to be lasting in her life. And it was a few months later. I tell you, it was a powerful thing. He works on our team, and we got word that he was getting baptized. And so we went to his church, and he was getting baptized. Well, his wife got baptized. His dad got baptized. His daughter got baptized. All the same day. 3 generations. That's legacy.
Yeah.
And so I'm so looking forward to you guys being with us. We're super stoked. We want to thank you for being on the show today. This has been a lot of fun. It's definitely been helpful, I think, for the men listening. And what we've realized is about 30% of our audience is female. I think they're telling the husbands what they won't listen to firsthand. So we're grateful that they're listening and following along. But we're excited about the conference that's coming up. Any parting words as we get ready to leave today?
Oh, we can't wait to be there. Love the show that you do and all that you guys are doing. And we're just thrilled to meet everybody in person. We rarely do this. And so, it's a unique opportunity. Even if you're coming a couple hours drive away, it will be valuable. It'll be worth it. And we can't wait to just spend time with you as well. So we're really looking forward to it.
That's awesome. And I want to encourage you, if you're listening today, take this show, something spoke to you, something inspired some hope in you, please share this. Help us get the word out. You just think about one family who has their destiny, their legacy shifted. It can impact the next 3 and 4 generations. And so, if you like this, don't only like the show, but please share it with somebody else, because this is going to air prior to the conference, and there'll be an opportunity for people to come out and be impacted. So, guys, remember, legacy is not so much what you leave to people. It's really more about what you leave in people. We'll see you next time on the Man Up Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Man Up Podcast. For more resources on your journey to becoming a better man, check out manupadventurecamp.com. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for our daily newsletter for encouragement and tips. If you haven't attended Man Up Adventure Camp yet, it's your time. Sign up now for Man Up 2025. We'll see you around the fire.